Hi, welcome to the podcast Ease into Clarity. I'm Dr. Divi, family doctor turned intuitive coach, and I'm here to help you. In this podcast, we will learn mental techniques, emotional techniques, and spiritual techniques to change daily problems. So maybe it's your husband, your boss, your coworker, your kids, they're driving you crazy. You can email me any of your questions, and I will use all the techniques I've learned over the years and help you. Grab your hot chocolate and make sure to subscribe. We'll see you soon. Ciao. Hello, and thank you for being here. It's Dr. Divi from the podcast Ease into Clarity. And I'm so excited. I've got Logan Quinn with me here today. He is going to be sharing with us. He's got quite a journey and a history that I'm so excited for you guys to hear about. I'm going to be gabbing about the body, metaphysical stuff, what he does, the intersection of the two worlds. So let's say hi to Logan and welcome him. Hey, Logan.
Hey everybody. Divi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? And thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. This is a large pleasure for me after a number of years of watching you in the community and you coming for a few sessions at the practice. I've kind of been eyeing you for a while, and obviously I'm in your program, so it's nice to kind of be getting closer over time.
I'll just give the listeners a bit of background. So a number of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was going through some stuff with my hip, was really sore, and I was seeing a breathwork person, Crystal, and she said, we're moving some energies, and she said, I think you should go see Logan. And I was like, okay. So I called this Logan guy up, saw him at his house in North Van a couple of times, and like literally after the second or third session, the pain went away. Some life stuff events occurred too. Don't get me wrong, but he moved me to a place where I could see. I can't. When I looked back, that version of me when I was lying on your bed and asking my guys to release the pain. I went through some life stuff afterwards, and after 2 or 3 times, the pain went away. But Logan somehow was able to move me to a different level of consciousness, which since then I've had to look at parts of myself that created that pain. So just want you to know he's a magic healer.
Hmm.
I don't know if he knows who he did. We're not going to talk about that. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's some magic in his hands that like literally I will tell you guys, I lied there face down. It was 3.5 years ago. Looked at the ground and said, because my pain was so bad, I was like, I couldn't exercise as much as I'm used to. I couldn't go to yoga and it felt like it came out of nowhere. And I literally looked at the ground and I said, guys, I will do anything. Please just take this pain away. Don't know what Logan did, but then my life, they made some shifts and swaps. And yeah, so thank you for that.
You're very welcome. It's nice to hear the background to that
Yeah.
because, for context, for those of you listening, Divi came for a few sessions and then disappeared for
Here.
years at a time. Had no idea whether there was a success or not. So reconnecting now and hearing that is nice to see what likely occurred energetically. And I'm sure like there are things that we can probably talk about today that I'll depict that I do with other practitioners and other clients as to how that might function. But I know a lot of your viewers are into the metaphysics, so that'll be a huge portion of what we'll probably talk about.
Amazing. And Logan, also, I mean, I don't know a lot of your background. So why don't you tell us a bit about you, your background, what you do? Like, bring me into your world.
Okay, I will do my best to summarize everything. We'll start very early. At age 2, got into gymnastics and was into a very condensed program there where they were trying to recruit me to go into competition. Didn't feel very good about that, so I left and joined martial arts. By age 10, I was going for my first black belt, and in that process, in that particular style of karate, you have to be under evaluation for a year before you can actually do your final examinations. During that year, you're getting taught how to teach. So every week, I had to teach kids of my own age, teach adults, teach people who were older than I was or further ahead, people who were behind, younger belts, older belts. And that was kind of the foundation of beginning to heed the calling that I think Spirit was trying to align me to, was that I'm meant to in some way guide people. So that started very early and then moved away from martial arts during high school, got into kinesiology. My particular high school in Ontario had a specialized like majors program where you could take environmental sciences early at a university level in high school,
Wow.
arts or sciences. So I took the sciences and got into kinesiology and bodybuilding and lifting at that point. Started co-teaching the weightlifting program at lunchtimes and eventually burnt out.
Got it.
Yeah, I was training a lot. I was playing volleyball on 2 different teams. I was training about 25 hours a week while going to school, and it was just a lot of things going on. And that was kind of my particular iteration of um, ignoring the callings of the body.
Right.
My brain started malfunctioning. I couldn't do math anymore. My relationships were falling apart. And during that period, I lost access to all of my emotions because I was so hell bent on pursuing what felt like alignment. It felt like my greatest excitement. I took it too far.
Right.
And that's where I started to learn some discernments as to the difference between ego and soul that we might talk about today, because the line can be fine. During that period, I started having these big meltdowns every 6 months where the body and psyche couldn't restrict what was trying to move through me, and then everything would come to the surface. I'd be crying for hours, slight psychotic breaks, and then it would just wall back up. And then I'd be back in robot mode for months at a time, and then it would happen again. So by the time I moved to BC, I grew up in Ontario, came out to Vancouver after high school, and I was like, I need to find an answer to this. And at the time, I had been studying online a particular coach in Florida who was talking about the intersection between weightlifting and body-centered psychotherapy.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah, his name is Elliot Hulse. He's a very popular YouTuber. He was also a student of one of my current mentors. But long story short to say, I found someone who worked in that particular stream of psychotherapy, who worked on the island. So I look around, I find a few different practitioners. I'm like, this old guy, he seems interesting. He's about 82 at this point. I'm like, I'll give him a try. I feel like I trust him. Turns out he was the co-founder of the institute.
Crazy.
So, yeah, the founder of this institute was a student of Wilhelm Reich's. Wilhelm Reich was a student of Freud. So there was a direct lineage there that I got kind of snuck into as a client. And within the first year of treatment, I got invited to join his postdoctorate psychotherapy program without an undergrad.
Oh,
So
wow.
while I was studying kinesiology and film studies in university, I was also doing body-centered psychotherapy mentorship with these practitioners from Italy and Poland and Mexico. And that was kind of my own private cocoon of learning the intersection between the energetics and the physical issues that kinesiology was never touching. So from there, started my own practice after graduating university. The pandemic hit, had to move away from performing. There's a whole middle section here where I was working in the circus at the time. So I was a performer in the circus and had to start from scratch and develop my own practice. And that's where I've been for the last almost 5 years.
Wow, it's so crazy. And for again for your list for the listeners, Logan's also in a program I teach called Return to Self. It's an intuitive coaching program that's 6 months long. So we just spent a weekend together in Whistler a couple weekends ago, waking up people's intuition. So tell me a bit about okay, I'm just gonna ask you, I'm gonna ask, we'll come back to intuition in a second. Why do you think people get sick?
I'd say the main underlying reason for all of it, and there's, everyone's specific story and association is that they're ignoring something.
Okay.
They're ignoring essentially love in some way, whether that is found externally in how you treat yourself through food or diet or exercise, actually listening to the emotions in your body that would put you deeper in touch with your true self that you are somehow demonizing, or could even be that the thing that's orchestrating all of these is a belief system, as you talk about,
Right.
right? Which castrates off certain possibilities. Well, this side of me is bad, therefore I shouldn't be that. Or I don't believe in holistic nutrition, therefore I'm going to eat crap food.
Right.
So all of these things are in essence saying you're cut off from love in some fundamental way.
It's beautiful. And when you work with your clients, this is for me and your listeners, what do you not only what do you do, but what do you feel you offer clients that helps them to improve?
I think that can be a complex answer, given that I work with a lot of different people
Right.
in pockets where they might be, I'll say, the more traditional in the matrix route. They're coming to me for a kinesiology-based approach. I'm doing structural rehabilitation to wake up the sensations in their body
Right.
so that we can get them to another level. Really, what I do for people is I help walk them through the stages of awakening mechanistically, depending on where they're at.
Cool. Do they know they're doing that? I'm just curious. Do they know that they're going through an awakening?
Some do,
Okay.
some don't. And those who don't or who are in like a gray zone, it's my job to kind of plant seeds as to what they're ready to hear
Right.
that might just slightly open that pinhole of awareness And then as they start to experience things, they'll be like, hey, remember what I told you 2 months ago? This is part of that moment here. And then once they've had an experience of that, I can start painting a larger model of what realm of reality they're stepping into, the rules of that level of consciousness and how that functions. But I wait until they've entered that playing field before I start doing that.
Perfect. And do you find clients are receptive, or does it vary person to person?
As you know, it varies
Yeah.
person to person.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful dance of just meeting other souls. Just like if you're making friends in different communities, some are ready for some kinds of conversations and some aren't. And it's a process of loving them for where they're at
Really.
and also being eager to grow alongside them in different ways.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes I'm hanging out with people who might be in a level of consciousness or level of interest I haven't been in for a decade. But then going back into that with them for a time makes me remember what it feels like to be in that and the struggles of that reality and the way of relating to people. And it does invoke a level of tenderness of, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's what that feels like. Oh, I love you.
And all the questions I'm asking, Logan, just so listeners know, are just purely intuitive. So this is all I'm tuning, I guess, to the listeners, but also to yourself. Um, Guys, want me to ask you a question. Like, so I'm not sure if you've read any Carolyn Miss's books, but Carolyn Miss, if anyone doesn't know, she wrote the book called Out of the Spirit, Sacred Contracts. She's a very famous medical intuitive back in the day. She's still
Mm.
alive, but she's really well known. She still is. She often talks about how people have an addiction to their sickness. Tell me what you think of that, or their health. Like, what do you think of that? I'm just curious what you think. And I'm going to share with you. I read that when I was myself quite sick in my late 20s, and I was working as a doctor at the time. I was like, oh, it was like a punch in my gut. What do you think?
I I'm gonna start by saying that I recognize what that feels like
Okay.
because I've had elements of that myself. I think anyone who is stuck, there is an addiction to a particular pattern.
Right.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be stuck. You would
Totally.
just let go and allow what needs to change to change. I think that has a lot to do with character structure, at least in the world of psychotherapy, how we title it is the influences that wind you up, embrace you against stressors that you feel like you can't tolerate
Right.
becomes a pathology of some sort. And that pathology is trying to keep you safe from a sense of overwhelm, whether that's purely stimulation wise or a series of associations in your own mind that you're then creating a sensation for.
Right.
If you're overstimulated, you're overwhelmed. That's essentially saying to the ego, I'm going to die because this sensation is so intense. I cannot possibly tolerate it. And to tolerate the sensation means I need to let go of something. That's essentially the ego saying I'm going to die because I need to
Right.
be different than what I currently am. So
Totally.
from that standpoint, that's the addiction. And the addiction is coming from not wanting to die in some way. I can unpack that more specifically for some of
Yeah.
the listeners at some point, but at the bottom of it, I would say is a fear of death.
Yeah. Because they only know this pain, this story, this wound.
Right.
So in your work, I mean, because you do some really, really cool stuff. Let's jump into the body more. Um, why does the body want to hold on to the illness?
I think that's a case by case scenario. I don't know that the body consistently wants to
Hmm?
so much as the mind, the belief systems, the
Hang on.
thing that believes it's running the show and recruiting the body, the driver of the car, is the one who's doing that. The body itself doesn't want to. All
Totally
it does
agree.
is it only operates from on and off, right? Like if you think as to how each system functions, heart, contract, relax, the bones, osteoblastic and osteoclastic activity, which is basically saying depositing tissue into the bone to build it out or breaking it down. Every system works the same way in the body. So it
Totally.
doesn't want to anything. It's the thing that's driving it that is the problem. And if you're identified with the wrong driver, that's the person who's wanting some sort of dysfunction because it believes it's safer. And that's typically, and I'm not going to say typically, I'm going to say it's exclusively the ego and
Yeah.
its own structures.
I love how you explain that. I'm going to say it slightly differently. In sort of my lingo, um, the body can't create, only the mind creates thoughts that then impact the body, which I think most people believe to some degree, but people don't even realize what their mind is thinking. In fact, I had a client that I worked with this morning whose husband or whose father Auschwitz, like we're talking, like, she's older and her parents were Auschwitz survivors, I think, if I remember correctly. Anyways, her dad, whose whole family died in Auschwitz, the entire family, he basically had a broken heart and never opened his heart after that, died from heart failure, died, like literally, right? And I find it fascinating when you look at somebody's death story as to what their life story is, because there's definitely like there's 100% a connection there.
Hmm.
It's wild.
Absolutely. Yeah, the first thing that came to mind was my mother.
Okay.
My mother's currently dealing with some health issues, which I'm probably not at,
Yeah, of course.
you know, in time, I'll be able to divulge that, but a very common experience. I think that, like you said, there's a direct correlation between the death that you're avoiding and the death that is guaranteed.
Yeah.
In psychotherapy, we would say your characterological fate. In some spiritual practices, you would say your karma.
Right.
But the karma itself could be a multitude of things that are backed up from previous lifetimes. Whereas your specific fate in this life might just be the lesson that you're currently stuck on. And you have other fates that are tied to other pieces of karma that are backed up, if you will.
Totally. Let's try to apply this, and we're going to get into intuition in a second. Let's apply some, because you obviously are very well versed in a lot of stuff, like lots of stuff. What do you think that the guys are asking me to speak about just a common illness like lower back pain? I guarantee somebody listening out there has lower back pain or knows somebody has lower back pain. And I know it's a
Okay.
big one, and there's not just one. But
Hmm.
if you had to get general and had to give like the majority of clients you've seen say with lower back pain, what's the cause
Sure.
for them?
Okay. Number of things. I'm going to paint a few different categories
Yeah.
for those listening. So we're going to go into a little lesson mode
Shoot.
here. Lower back, where is that located in the body? Obviously, that's going to be the intersection between the lower limbs and the trunk.
Right.
So we've got some considerations there. There's the lower chakras to look at. Then there's also what are the organs and nerve plexuses in that area. So all those categories to say the archetypes in that area not being supported. We have an inability to digest certain things and let go of certain things because obviously the excretions of the digestive tract are in that area as well. So if you're backed up, your gut's distended, your pelvic tilt's going to rotate, it's going to jam your spine, it's going to jack up the muscles on the backside because your pelvis is tilted. Those muscles get tight. So that could also be you can't digest an emotion and your digestive tract is mirroring that process. I can explain how the organs function in that way, but we're also looking at potentially a lack of ability to stand up for yourself,
Right.
right? Maybe your pelvis is tilting to try and offload energy so that you don't have the energy run from your upper body into your legs so you can ground properly to move towards something or move away because you're in fear. So the body will literally castrate the limbs, the lower limbs, off from the rest of the body so you can't feel your desire to stand up for yourself.
Totally.
Bunch of different archetypes, but those are just kind of like
Yeah.
two examples right there.
That's so beautiful. I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's the standing up for someone's the safety. It's all kinds of stuff. Why do you think humans, and we're going to thread in a few minutes about intuition and return to self. Why do you think humans struggle so much with that?
With the standing up for yourself
Yeah.
component.
Why? Yeah. Or even just knowing who they are. Because you spend so much time
Yeah.
in the psychotherapy realm, more than I have, obviously. So what do you think? Why do we suck at that?
Well, I'm laughing because I'm currently dealing with that issue
Oh, that's
myself, which
funny.
is
Okay,
funny.
funny.
Yeah, yeah. I'll speak for myself in this example, and then I'll kind of loop it back for everybody else who has their own specific thing going on. I think standing up for yourself has a lot to do with self-possession. And if you're not in touch with the parts of yourself that are your larger whole, there's nothing to possess, in which case there's nothing to stand up for. So step number one is actually building the sensations that you've been cutting off that give you the context of what is it that's trying to be said from your soul? What are these parts that are missing? If there are no sensations, there's no awareness as to what's missing, apart from a feeling of lack or confusion or an injury or disease, right? It's either going to show up in a positive route, energy moving, or energy isn't moving, and that tends to end up showing up as a dysfunction of some sort. So either way, you're aware of something missing.
Right.
And one of the two options, just which way are you going to choose to discover that missing piece? And when that starts to happen, standing up for yourself will be mandatory because you will either die or you will overcome it. Either way, the body has to offload that energy that's trying to move. So it will do it in one pathway or another, a disease process or a successful mobilization of the energy that will then make its way into your personality. It won't just be a sensation, it will become an awareness of what the sensation means and how that puts you in deeper connection to maybe your inner child
Right.
or Kali, if you're talking about a separate entity
Totally.
or frequency.
Yeah.
And you have to possess an ability to defend that in order for it to stay embodied.
I love that. I'm just going to thread a little bit. It makes sense in the metaphysical realm, spiritual realm, if we're not taught to be ourselves ever, right? From the time you're little, you're daddy's girl, your daddy's boy, whatever, mama's boy. You're always these definitions of somebody that you don't know who you are. So it doesn't shock me that lower back pain, just see that we can go through the entire body. We're not going to and dissect every single illness and come and have to realize that its origins are psychological, emotional, mental stuff that you were handed down. So I love that. I love that. So let's jump into the return to self. Then I want to blend intuition into the work you do. By the way, guys, if you haven't already picked up on it, Logan is like a breath of information. If you haven't picked up on that, he knows a ton of shit. And oh my God, you like blow me away as how much you know. Like, oh my God. So share with me. I mean, I know I'm asking the question. If you don't know, I teach the return to self intuition container at 6 months. Logan's in it. And I know I'm asking this question. So please just be as frank as you. And how's the program going for you? How is it going?
Really good. There are moments of frustration. There's moments of confusion. For context for you guys, in the Return to Self container, there is a retreat that's involved. And we just had that about a month ago in Whistler, which obviously is a lot of actualizing the processes that we've been using in small bits throughout the weeks, but condensed over 4 day period, if I'm not mistaken, 4 days. I haven't gone this deep in a long time with a container since my mentorship with Dr. Ben Shapiro. But this is in a totally different realm of reality where, in essence, in order to identify with your larger self, I'll say your soul, your true self, whatever you want to title it, source, you're detethering from what you've known yourself to be typically, which is the ego.
Totally.
And in psychotherapy, because there's an issue of the religious stuff that's not allowed to be part of the program, psychotherapy is devoid of that connection. So you identify, yes, with the body and with the ego, but they're told to be the same thing. So you can mobilize all these things and heal both structures, but it's still in absence of this larger piece. And that's been really destabilizing for me because while it's connecting you to more love and more peace, currently it feels difficult to discern what's real and what's not, given that all of this is an illusion that's created by the mind.
Totally.
What's actually happening?
100%.
How much do I lean into what is my body and my emotions telling me is happening versus am I creating my reality and is all of this just a game, which in essence is and is not. It's a paradox, which everything we can talk about that some other time. So it's difficult, it definitely feels very psychedelic in nature. It does feel like I am on medicine where there's a disillusionment with reality.
Totally.
But it's also a waking up too. It does feel like that moment in the Matrix movies where Neo gets unplugged and goes, "Why do my eyes hurt?" Because you've never used them before.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a bit of a mind FUCK, but at the same time, you really see like, wow, Abraham always talks about you create this reality. And so, when you start to see you're not your crazy thoughts, then who are you? And it can be destabilizing and super exciting. So, especially for people that are body workers or do body work, nutritionists, integrated doctors, whatever. How does intuition connect with your old work? I'm curious because I know that's something we left in Whistler.
Yeah, it's funny. It's been used over the years,
Totally.
except that they wouldn't label it that way,
Got it.
which is where it tends to muddy the effectiveness of the tool because you're not calling it what it is.
Right, right.
In psychotherapy, I might be getting a feeling, which we would call transference or countertransference, as to oh, the client is feeling this. I feel what they're feeling. That would be transference.
Right.
But maybe I'm seeing what they're feeling, or
Right.
maybe I am just hearing what's in their head. That'd be transference. But then there's also countertransference. What do I think they're trying to get out of this and
Totally.
making me feel, which is then sometimes messages from my guides. But psychotherapy doesn't say that. So we
Interesting.
would call it something else. We've been using and taught to use these tools,
Right.
but because you're not calling a hammer, you're using it upside down
Right.
sometimes.
Oh, 100%. Can you, because, like you're just starting to integrate the intuition piece into your work. Can you see how it can thread through? Like, what do you think?
100%.
Okay. Cool.
I mean, a great example was a couple of weeks ago, one of my long-running clients, we did a lot of intuition work in our session.
Right.
I mean, for the most part, this last year, I'm hands off with most of my clients, unless it's the first few sessions.
Sure.
So we're just talking. We had a few intuitive hits throughout the session. She was visited by both her mother and her sister. Her sister showed up because I saw green peas. I was like, I'm seeing green peas, and that's my sister. She used to love green peas, and this was tied to a story. So like those elements of intuition are just hints as to the frequency that is being picked up, that she was in the middle of feeling that story, that memory from the past tied to her mom and her sister. I'm receiving that as a tuning fork, and I'm getting a little pinhole into an association to that frequency, which is green peas. That was part of the story.
Right.
Later, we also get a hit about an owl. She leaves the session. She's out downtown walking towards her car, and there's an owl being attacked by crows. And as she turns the corner, the owl turns right towards her and looks at her dead in the eye for like 30 seconds, as if this moment was just for her. So there are constant synchronicities happening. It's just unless you use the language to label it properly, you will dismiss it.
Right.
So belief systems and the language inside each belief system is fundamental to actually seeing things accurately.
Right. And like we both, probably between the two of us, been in the healing realms for decades, multiple decades. I've always like I'm gonna ask you a question as to what you think.
Hmm.
Why do you think we're such in a stagnation in the healing realms? Do you know what I mean?
Ooh, do you mean societally? Do you
Yeah,
mean those who
societally.
are already in? Okay.
No, societally.
Hmm.
Like there's more medication still. There's, do you get it?
I do. I'm trying to figure out how far back to bring it and how conspiratorial to bring this,
You're good.
right? Because
Yeah,
many people might say that, the what you might call empire or the
sure.
forces that are in control, if you
Yeah,
want to look at it that way, those who've ended up in control have done so from not the best motivations. It's been corrupted in some way that may have started altruistically, but over time has become a power dynamic. And that can go back potentially all the way back to the last ice age,
sure.
right? Like everyone who has been in control, there's a reason why the through line of society, religions have borrowed from each other because those in control utilized these stories
Right,
to convert the masses and be like, well, we're using this one to control you, but I need to involve your particular religion into it. So you adopt this
right,
so that you come along for the journey so we can keep the masses under our control. We can keep making money off of you and using you for our particular motivations.
right.
That's one way to look at it.
Sure.
And that has a huge amount of, well, if you're the one being controlled, well, there are mind viruses or beliefs put into you to
Totally.
keep you funneled in certain ways of
Right.
possibilities. What's allowed and what's not. Immediately right there, you can see parts of your soul will be allowed and parts will not.
Totally. Yeah. Wow.
If we go a different route, I'll just
Yeah.
add another
Go for
tangent
it.
for those who aren't into that
Sure.
category, is yeah, the enculturation of being in tribe,
True. Yeah.
right? In order to fit in so that you don't die, the survival reflexes that come from the reptilian and mammalian brain of like fitting in, when you transition from being solo reptile into a mammalian structure
Yeah.
like apes, you have to have different parts of your brain turn on. And in that struggle to fit in, individuation has to somehow go
Yeah.
when you're transitioning into that culture.
Totally.
Now we're in the next awakening of yes, and we also need to maintain that access to the individual, which is your tether to source, your
Totally.
own divine connection. And I think that's where we're currently at, is where we've done the mammalian wave relating for so long, and now we're going into neo-mammalian or into what we might call the divine human,
Yeah.
not the lower human.
And what's interesting, just to bring Carolyn Mess back in her book, Anatomy of the Spirit, she talks a lot about that. About it's interesting because I never talk about Carolyn Mess. Um, about that's a common reason that we get sick. We stay in our tribes. We don't individuate. We don't get to know who we are. So when we get to know who we are, that we can heal so many of our health issues. So
Mhm.
that's crazy.
Yeah, did I kind of answer your question?
You did. You did.
Yeah.
I was just curious. That question came in, which is why I'm asking. So, and from my point of view, and it's identical. Um, I obviously, because I teach the containers I teach, I believe that if we don't add intuition to all to our remedies we're giving people, we're just going to give them sprinklings. Do you mean?
Mhm.
That's my take. I was just
Mhm.
teaching something on school a minute ago, and this woman who hopped on, I think she was like a nutritionist or something. She obviously knew the healing realms really well, but she said, "Divi, I can only eat 20 foods, and then I tried to eat one of the foods today, and I can't eat that." And I'm like, 20 foods. I think I'd go crazy. Right.
Mhm.
But then I showed her what was going on intuitively in her body. And she was like, oh my God. So I'm curious, do you think the world's ready to add intuition? Like, I agree with you that intuition is already happening. Most psychotherapists are using their intuition, right? Most doctors are using their intuition. Like, when I look back, I use my intuition all the time. I just didn't know it. Do you
Mhm.
think more people are ready for it? I'm curious, what do you think?
I think they are, but I don't think they understand fully the implications of what that means.
Right.
And there's a lot of people in the movement of using intuition who still have separation from using the word God or
Right.
having a direct relationship with
Right.
it.
Right.
So
Right.
they want the benefit of that connection, but will deny the connection to where that comes from, which creates a separation between those pathways, right? Like, and you can speak to this. This might be a great moment for you to actually vocalize in this podcast how that relationship functions between intuition and source coming from, you're a guide for me in that direction. Would you mind explaining that?
Sure. Flip flop back and forth. I think of me as being connected to this. Divi can connect to her higher realm of guides, divine support team, angels. And above that is the energy, if you want to call it, of God or source creator. So it's like that matrix of energy of my divine support team, my guides connected to yours, then gives me the intuitive nudge to say whatever I say to the client. But
Mhm.
it's all orchestrated by this energy that humans call God.
Right, which is separate from the smaller self. And I think people are still desperately hanging on to the
Right.
identification as the smaller self, which would be the ego, your character structure, or your personality.
Right.
Well, those are all programs.
Right.
And there's something greater than that, which is the never dying, unending feeling of deep love of who you were when you were a child. Many of us, if we have, those quiet moments by ourselves in our room every few years or so, we remember who we were like as a kid before our innocence was lost.
Totally.
And that feeling is very connected to connecting to God because it
Totally.
is that. But again, because society has the hangups with using that language, until that hang up drops and all the barnacles that have been attached to the word God kind of get cleaned up, I think there will still remain a separation with acquiring that skill.
Right. Right. I agree with you on that. And I think it could take whatever, it doesn't matter how long it takes, but I think it's going to take a certain amount of time. But I think when people are ready, they start coming for that type of work. And it's sort of like when I asked you the question, how's the return to self container been for you? You talked a bit how it's been a bit destabilizing in some ways because like this reality, what's real, what's not real. Like, and it can, and I think people are kind of like, I'm really just attached to my house, my family, my kids. But there's a
Mm.
whole other realm that's so much more magnificent that we can't even imagine.
Oh man, and if they've got any kind of dysfunction happening in relationship or in their body, they still haven't surrendered to their own body. And those could be the energies or the emotions of just the ego that's being repressed,
Totally.
which by extent is a fragment of the soul. But if they're already denying parts of the ego, they're probably not fully ready to be blasted open to the totality of the soul because the ego is just a small fragment of that and it's already overwhelmed.
Totally. I love how you said that. Beautiful. How are you feeling? Do you anything else you want to share with our listeners? Anything else you want to share? Well, if you
Hmm.
guys can't tell, Logan is a bundle, like insane amount of information.
I love the universe. I love existing. And I find myself in a lot of places. I think in a lot of ways I see that in your program too. So I would say I know I talk a lot about the sciencey stuff and I can kind of speak different, languages for people, but it comes from a desire in myself
Right.
to be in love and to find love through multiple places. And I would encourage that for anybody else, whether you want to look into intuition or you want to title it one way or another, what makes you more in love with reality? That will guide you to wherever you need to be. And if that's being a plumber or if that's uh, and being an archaeologist, then that's what it is.
I love that. So beautiful. And how can people get in touch with you?
Well, they can find me at medicineofman.com or medicineofmankind.com, pardon me, rebranded recently. They can also email me at medicineofmankind@gmail.com. And if you guys are interested in booking with me on both of those platforms, you can schedule in for a 30-minute free call where we can dive into a little bit more of what's going on for you and how I might be able to point you in the right direction, whether that's with me or with somebody else, for example, like Divi. And that would be the place to start that journey of falling deeper in love with reality.
I love that. And one other question before we wrap. Do clients see you only for body stuff or they just see you for mind? Like what do your clients come in with?
Clients will come in with
Everything.
anything, everything and anything, which is why I work on the body, the ego, and the soul. And we will work on expanding and making that layer more malleable. So if the body's got issues that they're not ready to approach from a soul or ego standpoint, we'll work on it on the body. We're looking at diet, maybe mobility or exercise. If that's not sufficient, then I help encourage them into deeper realms of psychotherapy that might be affecting their body issues. And when they've yielded to that level and the problems are still there, now we start looking at the soul component. How are you separate from source and how is that creating this downstream effects? And that's when we can really start getting into life coaching and helping mobilize you into no longer addressing a symptom, but start living in accordance with the divine pull of the universe, which will always keep you on track.
I love that, Logan. I love that. And okay, so thank you, Logan, so much. I'm going to do a
You're
quick
very welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you, listeners. I hope that helped. And there are certain of listeners who are going to fall in love with the way Logan's mind works. It blows my mind too, just so y'all know. And yeah, reach out to him. He's amazing. So you will be happy you did. And thanks again, Logan.
You're very welcome. The last thing I can say for the podcast is the Return to Self program, while it has been destabilizing, it has been incredibly opening as well. And I've been the most regulated I've been through very intense changes that I've ever been. And I'm only 29, and that's a huge transition that I'm in right now with my Saturn return. So for those of you who are awake in that aspect, the Saturn return is intense. Divi's program is really good. So I just wanted to plug that here for you.
Thank you. I'll take that. I'll take the plug. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, listeners. We'll see you guys again next week. All right. Take care, guys. Thank you so much for joining me in this podcast, Ease into Clarity. It is such a joy, pleasure, and honor to be in your living room. What I would love is if you follow me on Instagram, DRDIVI, or go to my website, drdivi.com, or write a review. That would be even more amazing. Thank you. If you really enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share it with friends, family, tell them to follow me, because I think the more of us that listen to the fact that each of us can start to shift, each of us can shift mental things, emotional things, spiritual shift, to shift our daily reality. When more and more of us do it, we get a better planet. We get more love. We get more happiness. We get more joy. So I'd love it if you followed. I'd love it if you shared this, because it would be such a joy and an honor. And again, if you have a question, guess what? I'm here for you. So send me an email, easeintoclarity@gmail.com. And as they come in, I will answer them in podcasts that are subsequent, whether it be your boss, your relationship, your husband, whatever. That's what I'm here for. Because the more of us that learn really simple mental techniques, really simple spiritual techniques, we change the physical reality we live in. Pretty soon, we have more peace, more ease, more joy, trickling across the whole world. Remember, there's a spiritual solution for every problem. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.